physical and mental health, levels of happiness, consistency in training, ability to maintain equipment. How successful you are in all of these things and more comes down to your habits. To paraphrase Aristotle and Will Durant, what we do repeatedly forms who we are. And if we're consistently organised, we're an organised person. If we run a lot, you're a runner. And if you consistently write songs, you're a songwriter, and so on. Anyone that watches this channel will know that I'm a big fan of goal setting, but is it really the best or only approach? The last 6 months I've been working on developing habits to reach my goals and, more importantly, beyond that. Going from being a sedentary daily drinker and weighing over 18 stone at the start of 2020 to losing over 15 kilos, knocking the drinking on the head and consistently training 10 to 12 hours a week. Sure, goals are good, but the danger with just focusing on goals is what happens after we reach them. The amount of people I know that have trained consistently for 2 years, got themselves under a certain weight, completed an Ironman, only for their TT bike to go on eBay 6 months later because it hasn't been touched, unlike the pies they've been stuffing in their mouths. So let's take a look at some theory, some context and some application to help us build and break habits and see how they are the key to us reaching our goals and beyond, but more vitally, making lifestyle changes that stick. Oh, and I was a little bit rigorous with this and sought out the original research for certain claims that have been made. So if you see a number in the corner of the screen, you can find a link in the description to find where it comes from. Okay, let's dive in. Let's begin by looking at some important facts and factors regarding habits. A habit is a repeated subconscious behaviour. They're things that we've either learned to do on purpose or without us noticing, and habits can be created and broken with conscious effort. One of the best and possibly the worst things about a habit is that they are frighteningly efficient. They are utterly effortless. Various studies show that habits make up anything between 35 and 50% of the behaviours in your day. Think about your morning routine. A routine, by the way, is a series of connected habits like getting up, showering, getting dressed, making coffee, cleaning your teeth. All of those is a habit that you don't have to think about or process unless something unusual happens, like you're staying somewhere else and your coffee machine isn't one you know how to work, for example. Imagine how exhausted you'd be by the time it got to 10 a.m. every day if you had to consciously process, comprehend, act and react to literally everything that happened. It's little wonder that babies sleep as much as they do. Habits being efficient and effortless is the key for me. When I set a goal, motivation is high, as I'm sure it is for most people, but motivation is fueled by high cost energy. It takes a lot out of you, and even the most motivated amongst us find dips in our ability to keep the pedal to the metal all the time. But if you build good habits that steer toward your goals, they're effortless. I bet most of the people that you think are highly motivated just actually have kick-ass habits. Let's break down how a habit works, and according to James Clear's research, and let's be clear about this, his ideas are excellent, but he's not the first to come up with all of this. You should also check out Charles Duhigg and Brendan Bouchard amongst many others. A habit works like this. You have a cue or a trigger, then you have a craving, and then there's a response or a behaviour followed by a reward. Let's look at a simple habit that I'm sure you perform every single day. You go into a room and it's dark, so you turn on the light. It's simple, right? But let's break this down. The cue is that the room's dark, the craving is that you want to see, the response is that you turn the light on, and the reward is that you can now see. So how can we use the composite parts of a habit to create new ones or break old ones? Well, the first thing to say is that we have to consciously and repeatedly carry out a habit that we want to build over time. The complexity of the habit you're building will indicate how long it will take to build, but there's no set amount of time. You just have to literally stick at it until it happens. Put it this way, 13 years later, this still happens. Have you brushed your teeth yet?
No, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, can you go and brush your teeth then, please? Yes, I can. So James Clear says that to build a habit, we need to make the cue or the trigger obvious, we need to make the craving attractive, we need to make the response easy, and the reward satisfying. And to break a habit, we need to make them the opposite. We need to make the cue or the trigger invisible, we need to make the craving unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying. And that's all very well and good, and they all sound like excellent words, but what in the real world do these things mean, and how do we apply them? Okay, to make a cue or a trigger obvious or invisible, here are 3 simple techniques to employ. Make it visible. Leave your running shoes out rather than putting them in a cupboard. Have fruit out in a bowl. Fill a jug of water to have out all day to remind you to drink water. Keep your swim goggles hanging on your door handle. Just create as many visual cues as you possibly can. Maybe even have a countdown to race day on your desktop, something like that. The Massachusetts General Hospital increased water consumption by nearly 30% in 3 months by moving soft drinks out of the way at the checkout and replacing it with bottled water. Indeed, the inverse of this is also effective. Hide it. Put your phone out of sight, not just in your back pocket, but out of the room. Put the Xbox controllers in a cupboard, put the beers or chocolates in the fridge in the garage, and so on. We all know that seeing something is a massive cue for us. Advertisers have been relying on it for years. So much so that from October the 1st this year in the UK, chocolate and crisps will be banned from being near the entrance or checkout of any supermarket, along with a watershed of 9 PM for TV adverts for similar products. Out of sight really is out of mind. Habit stacking. Identify a habit that you already have and, most vitally, you want to keep, and stack a new habit on top of it. For example, if you brew coffee at the same time every morning, do your squats whilst it's heating up, or after brushing your teeth, get your yoga mat out. One I developed over lockdown is that I tend to have a habit of getting out of bed at some point in the day, so I stacked onto that immediately making the bed after getting out of it, unless, of course, Bex is still in it, because sometimes that could make it a bit tricky. Your environment has a big impact on your habits. I know this firsthand because I inadvertently gave up smoking about a decade ago when I got rid of my recording studio. I pretty much only ever smoked there, and usually whilst mixing tracks for clients. I closed that area of freelancing down eventually, and along with it, the environment that triggered my smoking habit. To put it another way, during the Vietnam War, around 20% of the GIs stationed there were addicted to heroin. Upon their return to the US, only 5% had relapsed within a year and only 12% within 3 years. What's the standard post-rehab re-addiction rate? It is 90%. The environment plays a huge role in our triggers, both good and bad. So think about where you work, think about where you train, where you go to think, where you go to socialise. Are there environmental triggers that you want to change? The urge to do something, urge is an excellent word, urge, that's what we're talking about here, both to get the urge or to stop an urge. That's what we want to know how to do. I keep getting the urge to say urge, so let's have a look now. Culture, in my opinion, is similar to environment, but instead of what your surroundings are, it's who you surround yourself with. When I was a drinking, smoking, out-of-shape touring musician, I was surrounded by enablers, essentially a load of other drinking, smoking, out-of-shape touring musicians. Apologies to any musician I work with out there, I'm not talking about you, or am I? But also going to pubs and generally hanging out in environments and cultures where this behaviour is not just accepted and enabled, but it's actually valorised. You know what that means, right? It means to give or ascribe value or validity to. Essentially, getting drunk was celebrated. So the simple answer when I wanted to get fit was to surround myself with like-minded people. I joined a triathlon club, I got back to my old cycling club, and I started going to masters swimming. In fact, at one point I was in 2 tri clubs, 2 cycling clubs, which I still am, 2 athletics clubs, and a masters swim squad. I did my usual all-in approach. And the inverse was true. I could only do this when not surrounded by a drinking, smoking culture that coincided with me spending less time on the road and more time at home working on my own projects, something I'm very grateful to be able to do now. Let me add this point in here too. If you want to get better at something, work, train, associate, socialise with people that are better at it than you. The best music projects I've ever been involved in have been the ones that I've been most out of my depth on. Nerve-wracking as it is, these are the ones that I've learned the most and gained the most from, and the same goes with swimming, cycling and running groups. The minute I find myself at the front of a group or a lane for any length of time, maybe 3-4 weeks, it's time to go to the back of the next group and suffer like crazy again. I know a lot of people that are just happy to stay in the same swim lane or run or bike group and never move up. As Einstein probably didn't actually say, don't expect different results if you're doing the same thing. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Athletes often use the word fuel for food. This is reframing. It changes the process of eating from a simple two-step process of preparing the food and then consuming it, and adds a third step, an output. No, not that kind of output, for God's sake, an athletic one. The types of food you eat and when have an impact on your energy for any given session, your weight, your health, and so on. Attributing positive words to meals like satisfying, nourishing, healthy, nutritional, reframe them in a new positive way. I'm a fan of positive reframing and less of a fan of negative reframing. However, I have begun likening a chocolate bar or a bag of crisps to the equivalent to a pothole or broken glass in the road. Often avoidable, but it may result in a puncture that needs time to repair. So this is our actual behaviour, our action, the thing that we often think of as the habit itself. Sparking up the ciggy, opening the fridge and grabbing a beer, reaching for the biscuit tin, tucking yourself tightly in under the cover so bad things can't get you. No? Just me? Okay. Friction is something we encounter a lot as athletes. We wouldn't be able to run or corner on a bike without it, but this is much more a metaphorical friction. We're trying to make it easier to carry out the responses we want to keep and develop, and create more friction to make it harder to carry out the ones we want to get rid of. There are some correlations with the make it visible, invisible technique here too, of course. Putting something in plain sight will not just serve as a trigger for you, but it will also make it easier for you to use it, i.e. reducing friction. If you want to swim more, make sure you always have a bag with your costume, goggles, towel in the boot of your car. If you want to eat more healthily, make sure you have healthy food in the house at all times, so it's easy for you to make good food. The inverse of this is also true, as we've seen before. Not only will putting beer and chocolate in the fridge make it out of sight, but it also adds a layer of friction to you going to go and get it, especially if you put it in your mate's fridge and he lives in the next county. I've really tried to think this through with my training setup since we've moved house. In the old place, everything was on top of itself. I had to clear a space, often moving things outside the shed, set the bike up on the turbo each time, get out my laptop, sort out Zwift, ensure it had power, you name it, and it felt like there was a lot of friction between wanting to do a session and being able to do it. Now, well, now it's this simple. Yep, okay, it costs a bit of money to find 2 TVs from the local Changing Lives charity, a second-hand Apple TV, some smart plugs, but you know what? I want to do this. I want to work out a way to make it as frictionless as I can. There are loads of things you can do to streamline any process you want to make a habit, or add steps in the way of things that you don't. You know, one thing I often encounter is that people often use friction as an excuse sometimes. They put barriers in the way seemingly on purpose. Sometimes they add friction and then they use it as a reason why they can't do something. There are many reasons why people might do this: fear of failure, self-sabotage, maybe they don't really want to do what they think they want to do. But the bottom line is, though, if I can think of a simple solution to their issue and they haven't, either I have a skill others don't, or they're not really trying as hard as they possibly can. And I say that knowing that I'm an obsessive about stuff, and whatever I decide to do, I often go a bit too far sometimes. But you know what? There is always some solution to reduce friction that doesn't take much time or effort to apply. It is not about turning up to a training session every single week and smashing PBs. It is about turning up to a training session every single week. That's the number one goal. Just turn up. This is a habit that we want. Accept there'll be ups and downs, but just turn up. Repetition over perfection. Consistency is the key with what we do. It's the absolute goal. Turning up. So join a swim squad, get in the water, join an athletics club and do the weekly interval and tempo session, join a cycling club and do the weekly Sunday run, over and over. Repetition. This is basically telling us not to overburden our motivation. If you want to write regularly to begin with, focusing on just writing one sentence every day. You want to do yoga every day? Make the habit simply getting your yoga mat out. Putting your running kit on when you get home from work on Tuesdays and Thursdays and running for a minimum of 1 minute is insanely easy to motivate yourself to do. Do you think you'll run for more than 1 minute? Probably. Do you have to? No. Don't waste energy trying to build habits that are too big. Focus on building the foundation of the habit. Now, the thing to remember about any habit is that it has a reward built into it. It's the sole reason why we initiate the behaviour, to get the reward. And that's what makes this a bit tricky for breaking habits. We must try and make the reward unsatisfying. And how can we do that if the whole reason why we carry out the habit is because it gives us a satisfying reward? For a bad habit, the satisfaction is immediate, but in the long term, it's something we don't want to be doing. And this makes it complex and tricky. And in my opinion, you're better off focusing all your efforts on the front end of the process when building or breaking habits, the cue, craving and response parts. But let's see if there's anything we can do about the reward section. This is how those terrible diet companies work, the dreaded group weigh-in. Public humiliation is never the right path, and it shows how hard it is to get the balance right. We really don't want to punish ourselves, self-flagellating, self-shaming. The bloody world is out there doing that for us anyway, so let's not add to it for ourselves. So let's try and augment the good habits, telling people what you're planning to do and what your goal is, what your new behaviours are you're trying to establish is a key component, assuming, don't forget, that you've changed the environment and culture you're in. There's no point in telling 10 pints Tim down the fart and crumpet you're going to lose 56 kilos and run a sub 40 10k. Tell sub 40 Susie at the athletics club and ask for her help. But it's not just people that can help. Whilst I'm not keen on encouraging people to use their phones more than they already are, there is nearly always an app for it. Maintaining my 16/8 fasting streak on the Faster app, keeping the planned session charts green on Training Peaks, or simply ticking off tasks on my to-do list satisfies my most basic human need for dopamine. And it will for you too. Building a habit takes time, but the rewards last a lifetime. There's a link in the description below to more info on what I've gone into in this video, as I appreciate it's quite a lot to try and take on board, and you might need to revisit the ideas and consider how they apply to you. But if they help you like they've helped me, then let me know in the comments. If you have any further thoughts or ideas on any of this, then you know what to do. And if you've enjoyed this video and you're keen to see more videos like this to do with mindset relating to swimming, cycling and running, then I'm sure you know what to do. Subscribe and hit the notifications bell. Thanks for watching. Good luck tweaking those habits.